All right. Well, greetings to all of you. So glad you're here. This talk is, the name of it evolved over the week. Originally, it was just Novare Science. Now, I think, what did you settle on, John?
A quick start guide for teachers new to Novare Science.
Right. I have a PDF of the slides, which I'll put that up later, right? I don't need that right now. John's got some slides we're going to look at, and for his talk. My name is Jeffrey Mays. John and I are brothers, and we were sort of the guys who started the company 8+ years ago. John actually started the company, what's been 11 or plus years ago, while teaching full time. And then in 2012, we both went full time with it. Had a great time. The company was acquired by CAP in January, if you had not heard that. And that has been great for Novare. It means we've had access to all their resources, graphic design, video, all kinds of things that have been a great boon to Novare to spread the word about what we're doing. And I think if you're new to Novare, you're in for a treat, because if you're a science teacher, you're going to really get a new vision for what's possible with Novare books. So let's see. Let me just introduce our speaker today, John Mays. John got a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Texas A&M. And then he was 14 years in industry, in engineering, electrical engineering, and managing teams of engineers. He was drawn to education early on and got a master's of education, secondary education, from University of Houston in 1989. He did 36 hours toward a master's in physics at Texas A&M. And then more recently, he finished up a master's in liberal arts at St. Edward's University, which is here in Austin, and completed that in 2003. He taught at Regent School of Austin from 1999 until 2012. And then in 2012 went full time writing textbooks and teaching about mastery learning in the science classroom. So without further ado, I will turn it over to John now. John, welcome.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. I'm happy to see 29 people here. We have plenty of time, I think, in this hour and a half long format today. So that should give you time to ask questions of me that might come up, or if you've always wanted to ask me that weird question, today might be your chance to do that. So I've got some slides to show you. I'm going to go in and out of sharing my screen. As Jeffrey said, I made a PDF of these slides, so you don't have to feel like you need to take notes or anything. We can get the PDF to you later. So, but here's an outline of what I'm going to talk about. I have 9 talking points. So the first one is briefly give you an overview of our textbook philosophy. And then we'll take a quick look at the the textbooks that we have and what the recommended sequence is for them. And then I'll mention my book, Teaching Science, so that students learn science. I'll talk about the components in the curriculum. What are the nuts and bolts that you get in the box when you buy the Novare curriculum? how do they fit together. I'll mention about some of the books that have optional chapters to make sure you're aware of that. Then I'll talk about our 4 key themes: wonder, integration, mastery, and kingdom. And then I'll talk more on mastery itself because that one takes a little time to unpack. Then I'll mention something about our epistemological model, which is in every text, and I'll end up on how we handle controversial topics, just so you'll know what to expect with respect to those things. So with that in mind, I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to go back and forth, but I'm going to, let's see here.
While you're doing that, John, let me just tell everybody that, if you have questions for the Q&A, please put them in the chat box while we're going. I'm going to collect those, and at the end, we'll field those. So put your questions there, please. Thanks.
Oh, brother. This is the first, okay. This is the first time I've used this new Zoom will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit. What does that mean?
I'm recording it, so it'll be.
Yeah, this is the first time I've used Zoom since I installed a new computer last week. Oh, it's sharing now. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. I'm going to leave this slideshow in the development mode here because to put it in the present mode messes up all my monitors. So sorry about that. All right. So there's the outline that I just went through. So let's start. Here's the first talking point is our textbook philosophy. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but just so you'll know where we're coming from. I don't like the way textbooks are designed these days. I have very particular ideas about it. First, I don't think pages should look like websites, which are designed to distract. So our pages are designed to be read and to not distract from reading. We have an elegant and tasteful aesthetic that we try to make every book beautiful. The graphics are purposeful. We don't use these pandering sorts of kid on skateboard graphics just to make the book, to make science look fun to the students. Just being honest here, that's publishers pandering to kids. And I think we need to be the adults in the room and draw the students up to the adult world of science education rather than pandering to their childishness. The books are slim. That is a happy consequence of our emphasis on mastery, which I'll get to later. We always include the answers to every computational problem in every book so that students always know if they're doing the problems correctly. And all our questions in the books and on the quizzes and tests, they're all either verbal, meaning you write an answer in complete sentences, or they're computational. So we don't make use of any of the so-called objective, quick score kinds of things because of our emphasis on language, one of the points of integration that I'll get to later. Here is the recommended course sequence, a picture of each of the books we have in print, the major texts that is, and then the sequence that we've designed them for. I'll mention now that there are schools and homeschoolers that don't use this sequence. So that's okay if you're one of them. We have people who switch the 7th and 8th grade books around. We have people who put introductory physics after general biology. So lots of permutations, but this is what I had in mind when I developed the curriculum. So notice that they're starting in high school. There are 2 pathways or tracks, grade level 1 and an accelerated one. And I'll just make a quick comment on that. In a English class, everybody can understand what's going on. And some people will get A's on their papers and some people won't. But everybody can follow what's being said in the class. In science and math, that's not the case. If you go at a pace that's suitable for Accelerated students, you will leave the other students behind. They will not have a clue what you're talking about. And if you go at the pace for the grade level students, the upper ones, those capable of going faster in science and math will be bored. So it's important in every school that every school has these two pathways for science and math starting in 9th grade. And if that's not you, if your school has a one-size-fits-all program, as Regents did when I started teaching there in '99, then it's important. The board should understand it as their duty to provide two paths as soon as they're financially able to do so. Notice there is something very important about this curriculum, and that is in 9th grade, everyone takes physics. There's introductory physics, and there's another introductory physics called Accelerated Studies in Physics and Chemistry, which covers more or less the same physics, but it gets it done by February, and then switches to chemistry for the rest of the year. That allows the accelerated students to jumpstart into an accelerated chemistry their 10th grade year, which is when they're in Algebra 2. The grade level students take biology first because their Algebra 2 occurs in 11th grade, and that's when their chemistry occurs. So those are the core books for high school. I skipped over middle school where we have physical science and earth science. We have a life science book under development. It's still a few years away. And then finally, we have, for the accelerated students, we have an honors level physics class in 12th for seniors. This would be the first place vector analysis appears in the curriculum. The introductory physics books in 9th grade, the math, there's a lot of math, but it's essentially Algebra 1 level math. It's designed for students who are concurrently enrolled in Algebra 1 for the intro physics people. The accelerated ASPC, I call it, it's essentially also Algebra 1, although there are a couple of spots where I would expect students to be able to go a little bit beyond that, but not much. All right, so just to help you contextualize yourself, if you're new to our curriculum and what book you're teaching and how it fits in with our overall program, that's the context right there. All right, moving along. Here's an opportunity for me to stop sharing and let you have a look at me again while I tell you about this third point. The third point is that my first book that I ever published is called Teaching Science So That Students Learn Science. I call this my manifesto, and I strongly recommend every teacher using our curriculum that you read this book. It's only 150 pages, not counting the appendices, although you do want to read the appendices, so that means it's 163 pages. It covers my philosophy of education, my philosophy of science education, the nuts and bolts of teaching for mastery, the different points of integration, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. It doesn't talk much about our textbook philosophy, that's not in there, but it also has a chapter on grammar school science. It has a chapter on dealing with evolution, a whole chapter on expounding on the on what I'm going to mention briefly on the last part of today's talk. So, and it talks about how central language is to us as human beings made in God's image, and how that informs what we're doing when we're teaching science and writing science textbooks. It talks about using math in the science classroom, integrating history in the science classroom. So all the points of integration that I'm going to talk about today are discussed in there in a lot more detail. And a lot of the tools that I developed to make mastery work in the classroom are described there too. Things like the daily question routine and the weekly review guides and so on. All right. So I just encourage you to read that book if you haven't read it, because it will explain to you what I'm trying to do in the textbooks and what I'm trying to do with the support resources that I developed for them. Now, to share again, I want to talk about what are the components that are available in our curriculum and you know, how they fit together. So obviously there's the text itself. For all the texts besides, except for earth science and general biology, there is a solutions manual. Physical science is not either. So all the physics, introductory physics and chemistry texts have a solutions manual that is available with that text. The solutions manual is something I would have available for students in the classroom to use as a reference or a resource if they get stuck. Now, for two of the texts, General Chemistry and Introductory Physics, there is another book available called Complete Solutions and Answers, which has in it every single solution and every single answer that occurs on every single place in the book and on all the quizzes and tests. So this would not be a book that you want the students to get their hands on, but it's something that you probably want as a teacher. Then with the high school courses, there's an experiments book that goes with the course. This is kind of hard to explain. The experiments books are kind of all over the place. There are a lot of different resources here. In the middle school classes, earth science and physical science, the experiment manual for the teacher is on the CD, or it's now a digital download from CAP. It's no longer a CD, but it's included in that. The student instructions are in the book itself. Then starting in high school, there's the ninth grade courses. The student instructions for the labs are in the textbook. And the instructions for the teachers are found in two places. You can purchase our book called Favorite Experiments for Physics and Physical Science, which is a misnomer. It has nothing to do with physical science as people call it now. It really should say Favorite Experiments for the Introductory Physics courses and the Senior Physics course. But that book has in it every demo and experiment for all those courses. So there are about 65 different demos, plus a half dozen experiments for each course. Now, if you don't want the whole book of all the demos and stuff, the experiments themselves are available for the courses separately. So Introductory Physics and ASPC have almost the same experiments. ASPC has one extra one. There's a little experiments book for those. And then there's a different one for the senior physics that just has the experiments in it, the teacher instructions in particular. All right, then the digital resources download. I just realized that I left something off the list of this list here of things that are on or included in that download. All right, so you have quizzes and tests. You have a document, a PDF called All Keys and Sample Answers. So this would be the keys to the quizzes and tests with solutions worked out. And then sample answers for both quizzes and tests, as well as sample answers for all the verbal questions in the text. For a course like biology, that's almost every question, because almost every question is a verbal question in biology. There aren't that many computations in that course. Then there is the experiment guide that I mentioned for the two middle school classes, Novare Physical Science and Earth Science. On each download, there's a document about 10 pages long recommending things for teaching the class. There's a lesson list, a sample schedule that goes through the year. And in the two ninth grade courses, there is a sample graded lab report so that you can see what those look like. Now, the one thing I left off this list that I just realized applies to the 7th through 9th grade courses. And that is, as I will describe in detail in a moment, our texts are all designed to support a mastery-based teaching methodology. This is quite different than normal classes that you have been in and perhaps have taught. We're teaching for mastery. And part of that means that in the early years, we have to teach students how to study for mastery because they don't know until we teach them. So to aid with that, for 7th, 8th, and 9th grade courses, we have a set of weekly review guides. And you start passing these out on about the 3rd week of school. And the weekly review guide consists of a sequence of activities that students should go through during the week at home to review old material. So it has them doing things like practice stating Newton's laws of motion, practice this stoichiometry problem, practice going through this or that again that you maybe haven't looked at in a month. Make sure you can still do it, still talk about it. So there's a years-long supply of weekly review guides on Earth Science, Novare Physical Science, and the 2 9th grade classes, Introductory Physics and ASPC. And then finally, there's a book I wrote called the Student Lab Report Handbook. Since lab reports are a big deal, and I advocate having your students write their lab reports from scratch starting in 9th grade. The Lab Report Handbook tells the students how to do it in detail. It's about a 100-page book that every student should have. So that's the components. That's what you have available to you. And I can certainly address questions about that later. This is a quick slide. We don't need to spend much time here. I just want to make you aware, if you are teaching introductory physics, which is one of the 9th grade classes, or if you're teaching the senior level physics class, which is called Physics Modeling Nature, each of those textbooks has 2 sort of bonus chapters. Actually, there's another one I just realized, the last chapter in Chemistry for Accelerated Students also. That's chapter 13. Is on organic chemistry, and that is not a chapter, it's an introduction to organic. It's not a chapter that you should include in your regular year-long schedule. So I put the extra chapters in introductory physics because some teachers were telling me that they were going to use this text in 11th grade instead of 9th grade. Now, in 11th grade, students can move a lot faster. So that's why those 2 extra chapters are in there, not so that you can cram them into the 9th grade year. That would defeat the purpose of the mastery-based design of the course. In Physics Modeling Nature, the 2 extra chapters are on geometric optics and nuclear physics. I put those in there just in case somebody was wanting to take the AP test in physics. And this would give them a place to go to prepare. They're not chapters that you can include in the year. And the same thing for chapter 13 in chemistry. I put the, in CAS, I put the organics chapter in there just because I was getting really into it at the time. And I thought, if there's a bright kid who's moving ahead, who just can't wait, and who wants to go ahead and sample organic, here's something to give him something to, or her something to look at. It's not something you would include in your regular year unless, and this happens, but you might have a class of only 3 or 4 students and they're all really above average, really strong students who can go through the course quickly. If you have the luxury of being in such a situation and want to move more quickly and include the organic chapter, well then by all means do it, but don't subvert the mastery part of the course. Now, here are our 4 themes: wonder, integration, mastery, and kingdom. I'm going to stop the sharing just for a second so you can look at me while I kind of briefly walk through what these are all about. So we When I talk to teachers about teaching science, I say always start your science class with wonder. Uh, when you're teaching about God's world, you have your subject matter is one of the most wondrous things you could that exists. You know, the universe itself with all its stunning complexity and its baffling things. You know, light is dual nature, and the DNA is where our you know instructions are for making proteins. There's just so many fascinating aspects to nature. Always start there when you're talking to your students. In fact, I try in every book to make every chapter read like someone who's at a birthday party. You know, just kids, this is the coolest thing in the world. I'm so lucky to be the one that gets to tell you about this. Let's go look at this exciting piece of God's world together, and let us, like, use a shift metaphors. Let's smell the roses as we go. Let's stop and take a look at how stunning this is. We should let students see our fascination with God's world every single day in the classroom, not your routine. They don't care about your routine. And we, science teachers especially, a lot of us are technical, tech geeks. You know, a lot of us aren't the kind of gushy personality that you have when you're an for art teachers and things like that. A lot of us are very dry people. And that's just part of the territory. That, you know, if you're an engineer or computer programmer and then you wandered into teaching, that's just you. All right, let's just admit it. But that doesn't mean we have to stay us. We can grow as people. We can become more. And here's the piece of advice on how to do that. Start your class every day with, in your mind, thinking, how can I lead my students into the thrill of the world God made that we're going to look at today, rather than starting the class with my routine. Okay, class, today what we're going to do is A, B, and C. Here we go. Right? That's boring. Instead, boldly go where no man has gone before. All right? Take whatever metaphor you want, whatever TV show appeals to you, but you are talking to people about God's creation, which is the greatest gift, and its theme is love from beginning to end. The God of love gave us this great gift that we can never take for granted and never get over just how stupefying it is. That is what you should be thinking about every morning when you're thinking about your classes. Okay, I could go on that for the rest of our webinar, but I will stop and go to the next point, which is integration. There are 4 key points of integration where other disciplines need to be brought into science teaching. They are mathematics. A lot of people already get that one. Language. I've never heard anybody talk about this. So language. 3rd, history. 4th, epistemology. Now I'm going to talk about the epistemology on a separate slide in a few minutes. So right here, I'll just hit the first 3. Mathematics. Science is the #1 field for applying mathematics. Morris Klein writes that math really kind of went off the deep end when we started getting a different idea of what math was for than modeling nature. It's certainly its first and foremost use is modeling nature. So use math. I used to teach from Paul Hewitt's book, Conceptual Physics in 9th grade. No math, right? I found that even the most modestly gifted student needs to do the math, can do the math. So I started bringing math back in. That's what eventually led to me writing Introductory Physics and ASPC. It was because by then I was developing my own methods and everything. And the math needs to be there at a grade appropriate level. Second, language. If we want the full deal on this, read the book, Teaching Science so the Students Learn Science. But Walker Percy points out in one of his books that as language users. He talks about the Helen Keller story and how thinking for her actually really started when language began, when she had her breakthrough moment with her instructor who was trying to help her break through being deaf and dumb and being able to become a language user. And as soon as that happened, her brain just switched on. And it's fascinating, but when you think about God speaking the creation into existence, when you think about Jesus as the Logos, the Word, and you start following through all these different associations with language, you quickly will arrive at it's so central that we must be using it at every point in our teaching. That's why we don't use multiple choice tests. We want students to express in words, complete sentences, correct grammar, etc., using accurate phraseology, correct technical words, spelling the technical words correctly, etc. We want them always to be using language. That's why we write the lab reports from scratch, and so on. Third, history. Wolfgang Goethe, as you may know, one of the writers from the early part of the Romantic era in Germany, he made a statement in his book on the theory of colors that the history of science is science itself. So the history needs to be there. That's what science is. It's the history of what we've been thinking. So it's not a collection of facts. It's a process, and understanding how the process works means knowing where we've been and how we got to where we are now. So the history needs to be always present and not just relegated to boring little sidebars. All right, and the fourth point of integration is epistemology. In other words, how we know what we know, and how we talk about that with respect to scientific knowledge in particular. I'll come back to that in a minute. All right, moving right along and trying to stay on schedule. I'm now going to talk in a little more detail about our mastery-based teaching model, which is one of the most celebrated aspects of our curriculum, and certainly the thing that new teachers need to spend the most time on studying up on. So I think I'll switch back to my sharing again for this list. The point of the mastery-based teaching model is to destroy and crush forever and eliminate from the history of mankind the normal way students learn for the last 50 years, which is cram for a test, pass it, and then within 3 weeks, forget almost all of what was crammed. I decided 20 years ago that this model, which reigns supreme in American schools and has, ever since you and I were in first grade, is bankrupt, and people almost never talk about it. There have been various attempts at developing a mastery-based teaching model. There's thousands of research studies on the subject, but they all suffer from being overly simplistic in one way or another. So the mastery-based teaching model I developed is complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, but that's because we're dealing with human beings, and getting them to remember what you're teaching them isn't so simple as just saying, well, here's this one trick. Everybody has to get a 95. That'll do it. No, it doesn't. It means everybody gets a 95, and then 3 weeks later, they forget it. Okay, so what we need is a full, robust model, and that's what we have. Here are some of the highlights of that model. For grades 7 through 9, we use quizzes, not tests. They occur weekly. They're 30 minutes long, and they're cumulative to the start of the year. Every quiz has anywhere from 30 to 50% of the content on the quiz is from prior chapters. You cannot survive the quizzes and make a good grade if you're not studying for long-term retention. That's what the weekly review guides are designed to bring to the table for the students, is retention, is how to study for retention. So for the upper grades, we have exams that are cumulative. And then there are a couple of quizzes, like 5-minute quizzes to use between each test to help students stay up to date with the class, not fall behind like they tend to do when you're going 2.5 weeks between tests and they have other grades to, courses to worry about. And well, they will end up falling back into cram, pass, forget behavior unless we have a motivator to keep them on schedule, so the quizzes can help with that. Here's some other key elements in the mastery teaching model, okay? First, we cull the curriculum down to what can be mastered in 1 year. 800 pages of biology can be mastered in 1 year by no man or woman. So why would a book ever be that big? It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be. It's just carrying 6 pounds around for no reason. So this is the happy side effect I mentioned earlier. Once you cull the curriculum to the real basics, the stuff that you really need to get to, you have about 350 pages of content. And that means the books can be slim, and it means this is what we can master in 1 year. So I counsel people to forget this ridiculous idea like, well, I just want to cover this so they'll have seen it before when they get to college. No. If you do that, they'll forget it within 5 minutes, okay? That's a completely worthless thing to think. Take out everything that isn't of crucial importance. And the other stuff that isn't of crucial importance, there's stuff in our books that isn't of crucial importance. It's there for, to make the experience of being in the book fun. I mean, I'm not saying strip everything down so that it's like a manual for fixing a motorcycle engine. We want students to enjoy a rich environment. So the books are full of photographs and art and all kinds of stuff, right? But in terms of the content that they need to master, that is listed on the objectives lists at the front end of every chapter. And those objectives are what we're going to focus on mastering. Another key element is there's no grade credit given for homework. I could talk about this for a long time. You can read about it in the book, but this kills the mastery model. If students are getting 30% in their grade for doing their homework, that doesn't prove that they learned anything. It just shows that they got their homework paper ready to turn in. The quizzes and tests, that's where you show that you have mastered and are continuing to master and continue to remember everything that we've been covering in this class. So the homework, you have to do it. Homework, as I like to say, is a necessary learning activity. It is not a legitimate assessment of whether learning has occurred. Then teaching students to study for retention by review and practice and using the weekly review guides. Those are other key elements in the mastery teaching model. Now, I used to do a 2.5-day seminar in the summer teaching the full nuts and bolts. That's how long it takes to go through the full nuts and bolts of how to teach for mastery. Once CAP acquired the class, the first thing they did with me was say, we want that seminar on a video. And people aren't going to pay $300 and fly to where you are anymore. It's going to be available online. So it is. So in their Classical Academic Press on their website, you can find Classical U. It's a subscription graduate school service, and there is now a Teaching for Mastery video series that I made that is maybe 12 hours long, and it is a video version of that seminar. So that's as you want as much detail as you can get on how to teach for mastery. That's it. That's the mother load. So if you have time to watch that before this summer, before your prep goes into full swing, I would commend that to you. So you have really several levels of learning how mastery teaching works. Like the lowest level would be this seminar, this webinar, where you're hearing about it for only a few minutes. Then the mid-level is to read teaching science so that students learn science. And then the top level would be to go to to take that course at Classical U, where you get the full seminar. Teaching for mastery results in, it delivers results that you will find astonishing. I learned it, I knew this in my own case, all right? I have so many testimonials, and in the mastery seminar on Classical U, you can hear some of them told at length, but students' lives are completely changed. Some of them are brought from being feckless C student teenagers who hate school to being transformed into the kind of person who loves school, knows how to study, makes A's, and is a completely different person. I'm such a believer in this methodology because I've seen it change people over and over again. I know from my own experience, it's accessible to the most modestly gifted students in the school. In fact, I argue it is mostly for them. And it's not for the geniuses in your class. The top like 10% of your students are so good and so smart that they will learn despite us. They don't need us. They're just there for the social experience. I mean, they're so smart, they can just read the book in about a week and remember it. God bless those people. What the other 90% of people need is us, teachers, to teach them in a way so that their experience changes them and becomes part of them, instead of teaching them in a way where they're just going to jump through hoops, take 12 tests, go home in the summer, remember none of it, and then next year the teacher has to start with 2 months of review because we know you don't remember anything from last year, right? That is a failed educational model. And brothers and sisters, I am advocating just taking arms against it. And this mastery-based teaching model that I advocate is the way to do it. All right, so moving on then to conclude my remarks by getting to the last couple of slides. The penultimate slide is about my epistemological model. I'm going to share again because this is in every book. I mentioned about epistemology needing to be part of one of the 4 points of integration that appears in your science class. So this is the epistemology that's in all of our books, even the ones I didn't write, because the people who wrote them were working for me. So, you know, it's in there. They read what I wrote and they rewrote it and put it in their books too, with the same graphic. So here's the skinny on this. I'll just make this brief. It's described in it takes 2 or 3 chapters in teaching science so that students learn science to roll this out. So it's there. It's also explained in detail in the 7th, 8th, and 9th grade texts. So the longest expositions about this model are in those books. But here are some of the ideas included there. First is to distinguish between truth and facts. We believers believe that truths are true forever and God reveals them to us. Truths like God is love and that Jesus died for our sins are true forever, right? By contrast, all scientific knowledge is provisional. Science is not in the business of making truth claims. Now, some people don't understand this, but if you read and talk to responsible scientists, this is what they say. If you can read anything by Einstein, Arthur Eddington, Bohr, Niels Bohr, Gilbert, G.H., what's the chemist? His name isn't coming right now. Anyway, they all speak the same way about scientific knowledge. We're trying to get at the truth, but we don't have access to the truth. We are building models of nature. We're modeling. That's what science is doing. That's what a theory is. It's a model of how nature works. If it's correct, we wouldn't know it. All we know is that the data from experiments supports the model consistently. But that doesn't mean the model is correct. We think everything is made of atoms. All the experiments that we do support that that model, that things are made of atoms. But they might not be. Things might be made of poetry for all we know. God is the only one who really knows what everything is made of. And in fact, the more you know about atoms and the things inside atoms like electrons, the claim that things are made of poetry starts making more and more sense, because we don't really know what an electron is. All we know is some of the properties it has. So anyway, theories are supported by experiment or not. We don't talk about theories as being proved or disproved, right? So these are some of the ideas behind this epistemological model. It's very helpful. It helps students understand the difference between the kinds of claims the Bible makes and the kinds of claims science makes. It also takes the scary out of studying something like evolution, all right? Evolution is not a truth claim. If you're talking to a responsible scientist, evolution is a scientific model that tries to explain certain data. That's all it is, right? So it may or may not be a correct explanation of the data. There are other explanations many Christians like to talk about. By understanding that science isn't making truth claims, we can take some of the scariness out of some of the things that Christians find difficult to talk about. Now, finally, I'll just say that this graphic that's shown here, this is my graphic showing how the process of science proceeds. I call it the cycle of scientific enterprise. And I always start the explanation here at theory. A theory is our best, a good accepted theory is our best explanation at present. It accounts for most of the facts. Good theories almost never account for all the facts. There's always some things we know that we can't really account for with our best theory. A hypothesis is a prediction based on a theory. So it's a more narrow piece of predictive statement, which we're going to test. The experiment puts the hypothesis to the test, and as the result, we get results. If they're positive, if the hypothesis is supported by the experimental data, then the data support the theory. We have new facts that came out of this experiment that this theory explains. If not, we have a problem, and we go backwards around the ring to figure out why. Was there something wrong with the experiment? Was it a faulty hypothesis, or is there a gap in the theory? That's the epistemological model in brief. Finally, I will end on this, and then we'll go to Q&A. Just want to say a brief word about our approach to controversial topics in science. So, in a word, we decided years ago, right before we were publishing our Earth Science book, that the time to accept the standard scientific claim about the old age of the Earth, 4.7 billion years, it's time to accept that. So we do. I know that many evangelical Christians in America do not. And I know it continues to rage as a controversy to this day. And there are large organizations hammering this for all they are worth. And they claim that what we're doing is leading students away from the Bible, as one person put it. But the data, the evidence for an old Earth was already persuasive at the beginning of the 19th century, over 200 years ago. Since then, it's only gotten more so. If you want to read a book that gets into this as deep as you can, that was written by two faithful, godly Christian geologists, both of whom at the time they wrote it were professors at Calvin College in Grand Rapids, read The Bible, Rocks, and Time. It is a detailed treatment on the subject. The Bible, Rocks, and Time. We also accept the mainstream scientific claims supporting the fact that human-caused climate change is in advanced development, that acid rain occurs due to the sulfur produced by human coal burning, that CFCs were in fact damaging the ozone layer back in the 70s until we banned them. So these are claims that people have challenged us on, various places. Climate change, that subject only occurs in our new biology book. Acid rain and the CFC thing, those only occur in the chemistry books, both of them. The Earth age thing is only described in detail in the Earth Science book, and to a more brief extent in the new biology book, General Biology. There are a couple of glancing references in some of the other physics books to things like the cosmic microwave background as evidence supporting the Big Bang Theory. So some people freak out when they see that one sentence reference in that book to that. But since I accept the scientific evidence for the old Earth, I'm not worried about that. By the way, there are schools that are entirely young Earth creationist cultures that use our old Earth science text simply because they like our books so much that they're willing to use it. And the head of the school just said, we'll deal with it. We want to use your book. So people use our stuff even when they have to explain away in their community a lot of what's in the book. Now, finally, the mother of all controversies is, of course, evolution. Here's what we do in our biology book. And there's the last chapter of Teaching Science So That Students Learn Science is a full explanation of this philosophy. But essentially, it boils down to this. This is a controversy we're not going to settle. It makes everyone angry. And our job as teachers is teaching, not proselytizing, teaching students how to think, developing their minds. So this is a perfect opportunity, rather than teaching them what they're supposed to think, is teaching them how to think. So give them the information, show them how to process it, explain why some people think differently, and so on. That's how we treat it. Now, in the book itself, in general biology, we don't do a thing with the evolution chapter except present evolutionary theory without endorsement and without criticism. So, so far we've heard from one of our old customers, 10-year customer, who absolutely deplores what we did with evolution. We've heard from other people, many actually, who've said, one professor said it was the best treatment of evolution he'd ever read. And he's a professor of physiology and pathology biochemistry and physiology, something like that. I think most people will be very happy with the way we presented evolution, which should be an accurate presentation so that people who don't have a problem with it can be happy that it was presented accurately. But there's no endorsement of the theory in the book. And our usual giddiness over how cool science is, I sort of turned that off in that one chapter so that no one can claim that we were being too excited about evolution. And so I stripped all that out and just made it a plain presentation without ever once saying, oh, isn't this cool? Which is in every other chapter of every book, except that chapter. All right, so we didn't talk about the other models, the creation science model or anything like that. We didn't criticize the theory for the reason that we don't criticize any other theory in any other book, okay? Scientific theories are provisional. That's what they are. They're models. They're not things that we criticize. They're the reigning model that the scientists use, and they all are in various degrees, maybe more or less on track. That relates back to our epistemological model. So that pretty much concludes my prepared remarks. And at this time, we have half an hour, a little more remaining, and I'll be happy to address any and all questions that we have time for. And Jeffrey's going to help, I hope, moderate that.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, John, for the presentation. A lot of good, just a shot in the arm presentation of what you can get. Well, the mastery, I'll mention again the mastery learning, the science mastery workshop. I put a link to that in the chat box a little bit ago, where you can see it on the Classical U website if you're interested in signing up for that. I believe the first 3 sessions are complimentary, and so you can get a taste for what it's like. I'm going to go ahead and put the link now to the PDF of the slides that John used in this session, and you can you're welcome to download those slides if you like. So I'm seeing, okay, I had a few questions earlier, and I'm seeing a few others come in now. Once again, folks, if you have a question, please put it in the chat box. Pardon me. We've got about, yeah, we can go for up to 30 minutes here till the top of the hour, if need be. So, John, the first question is, what success have any grammar schools had in backward mapping your, what's in the book Teaching Science, the section called Things Every Rising 7th Grader Should Know, across the K through 6 scope and sequence? So what success have grammar schools had in applying those principles from the book? Do we have any anecdotal evidence?
Well, I don't have any anecdotal information about the success they've had. I do know that I have talked to a number of schools who took those 3 tables and used them as a template for overhauling their science program in grammar school. And you know, they'll buy many copies of the book. The grammar school teachers will read it, and then they'll use that chapter and those 3 tables as a template. I haven't heard stories of what happens after they do it. I only hear that, oh, well, that's what we're doing, and then they go off and do it.
Okay, that's fine. I think these first 3 or so were from our friend and colleague, Andrew Elizalde. Let's see, he asks, many schools are delivering some kind of distance learning online. How do you advise we go about sharing documents, such as the weekly review guides, with students online? I assume there are some copyright issues you would like us to respect. And how do these impact the sharing or not sharing of documents online?
Well, I'll start the response to that question by saying that there's a helpful document that I think would be helpful to everybody in these times that Jeffrey has and can make available to you. It's a compilation of an email conversation I had with some teachers in Houston who were teaching with a 2-day-a-week university style model. And the question, you know, they already had very serious limitations on class time and wanted ideas on how to use our curriculum in that environment. So a lot of the ideas, like using Google Chats and things for getting students to interact with each other outside of the class, those are described there. So I think that document would be helpful. So, you know, if you would like it, Jeffrey can email it to you if you'll email him, or if he can find it quickly and somehow share it.
Let me see if I can do that.
Anyway, we have shared that document with anybody who emails in. So now regarding the question of copyright issues and so on, let me think here just for a second.
All right.
The way the, go ahead, Jeffrey.
The link is there now. It's in the chat box.
The documents in the digital resources download are supplied to teachers. The things like weekly review guides are Word documents so that you can edit them as needed to fit your context. Ditto for quizzes and tests, those are Word documents. I don't want to speak for CAP, and I haven't talked to them about this, about the copyright thing. Of course, the easiest thing to do, if that's a concern, and I don't know if it is, the easiest thing to do would just be make a PDF of things before you put it on your class website. So that would perhaps be the safest thing, is once you've got the document ready to use, then instead of passing out a piece of paper to everybody, you can email them the PDF or post it on your website. That's about all I have to say about that. I don't know if CAP's policy is, I mean, we're still new to the classical academic press family, and this is the first time this question's come up since I've gone to work for them. So it's not really up to me to say anymore. So I will have to defer to them on that, but.
Okay. Yeah, that question comes up a lot.
We should probably, CAP should probably formulate a generic answer to it and put it up on their website somehow. So
right.
I'll make a note to bring this up with Chris Perrin, the CEO.
Okay. All right. Someone's asking, can I put that link back up? I will do that. I posted it a second ago, but somebody maybe missed it. So let me put that back up. Okay, there it is in the chat box if you want to read that article, the link to it. Okay, moving along, let's see. For grades, a question for grades 7 through 9. Should teachers use only weekly quizzes, or might they also include occasional tests, say every 2 to 3 weeks? And what apologetic might you offer to administrators, divisional heads, and so on? Why your grades 7 through 9 students are not taking any tests?
I'm so glad this person asked this question. Let me state in the most forceful and unequivocal fashion possible to my limited powers of rhetoric that the weekly quiz regimen, when I discovered it as an alternative to chapter tests for those grades, was the instantaneously most powerful tool in the toolbox for promoting mastery and for breaking the cram, pass, forget cycle. The day I discovered that, or the year I started doing it, I should say, I had no idea. It was like just, you heard the old joke about the farmer who bought a new, the woodcutter who bought a new chainsaw, and he took it home, and the salesman told him with this chainsaw, you can do 3 cords of wood in a day. And the woodcutter took that new chainsaw home, and despite his efforts, he could never get more than 1.5 cords of wood cut in a day. So he went back to the shop and talked to the salesman and said, you promised I could do 3 cords of wood in a day. I can't even get half, I can barely get half that, working as hard as I can. If I can get 1.5 cords tops. And the salesman fired up the chainsaw, and the woodcutter said, "What's that noise?" So that's what it's like teaching 7th through 9th graders using chapter tests. If you're trying to get them to remember, you're cutting with the chainsaw motor turned off, okay? You're missing out on one of the most powerful things that can accomplish your mission. Using chapter tests with students that age just trains them in cram, pass, forget behavior. Your class, instead of becoming a place where people learn and have their lives changed, is a training ground for how to cram. And then that's what they, at the end of 3 years of that, man, that's what they are good at. Cramming, passing, and forgetting. They're not good at remembering. So we still do have semester exams. So there are 2 exams that occur in those courses. When I first started developing the mastery model years ago, and I'd been using it for a couple of years and I had refined it pretty well. You know, back then, Regents, this is in the early 2000s, Regents course schedule, school schedule had earmarked a whole week of review before the final exam for the fall, another whole week of review before the final exam in the spring. And I'll never forget. So we came, after I was doing this cumulative quiz thing, every 30 minutes every week, same time, boom, like clockwork. We came to final exam review week and the students in my class said, Mr. Mays, we don't need a week of review. Everybody we're all ready for your exam. Every week is final exam review week in your class. No one can ever forget anything. And everybody's ready to answer any question on them at the moment's notice all year long. Can we use this week of review time to review for our other classes? Because we don't need to review for yours. And then my test would never pull back. It was always problems that were straight up, just like the quizzes. And the average on the final exams was always within a point of the quiz average, showing that, I mean, exactly what the students said, that's what was going on. So instead of getting a exam review sheet that's got stuff written on it that can't even remember having studied before, the students themselves were saying, we don't need review week in your class. We're ready. In fact, if we could do it, we just take the final now and get it over with, and then we can spend the rest of the next 2 weeks worrying about our other classes. The difference is just shocking if you've never witnessed it. So this is extremely powerful. Now, many years after I started using that regimen, the weekly quiz, you know, in a classroom after the first week of school, the students, or at first 2 weeks, the students know the drill. They know the quiz is on this day. It's always on this day. It's going to happen at the first of the class. It's going to start the moment the bell rings. It's going to end 30 minutes later. It's timed. You have no time to waste. Get busy. So they would come in, get ready, get their calculator, get their pens, get their eraser, everything all organized before the bell even rings. And the second the bell rings, I'm walking around passing out papers and boom, they go. It's just beautiful to watch. And then the quizzes are designed to take about 20 minutes for people who are prepared, maybe 25 on a hard one. But anyway, the last 5 or 10 minutes is just check over, add, enhance, correct, and then turn it in. And well, after I started doing this, many years later, I was listening to the radio one day driving around, and I heard a report about a new study that had just came out about how humans respond to testing. And the bottom line of the study was the more frequently people are tested on a certain topic, the more powerful their long-term memory of that topic becomes. That the act of being tested enhances memory. Now, this seems to me to be pretty much what you would, you know, it seems like common sense that it would be this way, right? If someone asks me for my wife's cell phone number, you know, once a year, I may not be able to remember it. But if, you know, back in the day before it was automatically in my smartphone, when I had to actually call using the number, I had to remember it because I was calling it up frequently. So I remembered it. The more frequently you are tested, the better you remember. So that study, when it came out, was like, well, now I have some research backing my testing regimen, but I already knew how powerful it was before the study came out. So yeah, I could write a whole paper on this if someone needs ammo to talk to your administrator, you can email me and I'll write a blog post about it or something to trot out all these points about it. But it's described in some length at some length in Teaching Science so that students learn science. So get that book and turn there first. I think it's described in the chapter 7 called Science as a Cumulative Discipline.
All right. Very good. Okay. Excuse me. All right. Here's a new question for you. I mean, I think you'll appreciate this. I could just summarize. It's a longer question, so let me just kind of summarize it. This is a person who has taken the Science Mastery Workshop and knows all about mastery learning, but is teaching in a economically disadvantaged location, and where the reading levels of students are 2 to 4 grades behind what you would find in a more affluent areas of the nation. So do you have any advice on how best to present mastery learning, how mastery learning can be adapted to communities that are suffering with low academic performance because of these factors?
The best answer I can give is to tell you an anecdote from a few years ago. It is almost certain that I will cry telling this story. So don't be embarrassed for me. I cry all the time. I'm a crybaby. A few years ago, as a one-off experiment, I taught for a year at a school, not Regents. Taught full-time. I taught introductory physics, designed for 9th grade. But I taught it to juniors and seniors. All my students were juniors and seniors. They had never seen anything like my mastery model before, and they were not prepared for it. The school had the school was a 9th through 12th grade school. They did not have their own K through 8. Students came from everywhere with all kinds of varying levels of preparation. So that's the context. Now, in that context, I want to tell you about a particular young man. This was a few years ago. I can remember his name, but I don't want to say it, so I'll use a different name. Let's call him Mark. This is my first and only year teaching at the school, so I did not know Mark before. He was a junior. But in the first week of school, the guidance counselor staff had a meeting between Mark, his parents, and all his teachers, and all the key administrators, and all the guidance counseling staff, which was 3 or 4 people. So there were about 10 or 12, maybe 15 people in this meeting, including the student. The subject of the meeting was that Mark's, while he's a really nice young man, his academic gifts were so severely limited that it was questionable whether he was going to be able to continue to stay at the school. He was failing typically all classes. All classes. The upshot of the meeting was to give it 1 more year. And then maybe he would have to leave. His final grade in my class was 90. You should have seen the joy on that young man's face the day I ran out of the classroom and found him in the hall between classes an hour after the first time he made a B on one of my quizzes. That poor fella. In the opening week of school, he's told you maybe can't go here anymore because you're just not smart enough. And here I am showing up at this school for the first time with my mastery teaching model, you know, scary, change, you know, totally different. Well, he failed the fall semester. He failed both terms. He went on academic probation. He's the school's star golfer on the golf team, but he couldn't play. It wasn't just me. He was failing all his classes. So it's like situation normal for him. And then I sat him down in January when we came back from Christmas. I said, Mark, I've been thinking about your situation. And I've got some advice. I said, you know, half the credit on every quiz is for computations. Those don't require any use of language. Oh, I should say, Mark was unable to write a complete sentence in English spontaneously and make it say something coherent. He was incapable of doing that. All his answers to questions that were free form were radically incoherent. But I said, Mark, those questions, they appear on quizzes, but it's not most of the questions. In fact, it's a small percentage of the questions. What if we concentrate on the things that you can practice until you got them perfect, and then you can just show up for the quiz and just roll it out? So 45% of every quiz is computations. I said, Mark, computations are just a matter of practicing them. You remember the formula, you remember the unit conversions, and then you just solve the problem. If you do enough of them, you can just write them down. And I said on the back, okay, the computations are on the front. On the back, it's all the verbal questions, and at least half of those are things you can memorize. So you can memorize definitions. You can memorize the little biographies about the scientists that I want you to know about. You can just memorize them. Newton's laws of motion, yeah, you have to be able to state those, but you can just memorize them. So I said, Mark, you can probably get a decent grade in the class just by practicing and memorizing, which is something you can do. And the hard things that depend on your reading ability and your writing ability, we can mitigate the damage by having the damage just be limited to that. And in fact, you'll get some points for that. It's not a total loss. Okay, so here's what happened. Mark started studying exactly the way I told him to. Within about 3 weeks, his grade started moving from 50 up, and it went up for the rest of the year, straight up. He, like I said, the first time he ever made a B on a quiz, I was so excited. I was quivering, and I knew I could find him in the hall between the next passing period. It was only an hour after the quiz had been taken, and I ran out and I found him. I grabbed him by the shoulders and I just said, I came out here to tell you what you did on this quiz. And he said, what'd I make? And I told him it was like an 83. And he said, I thought I did pretty well. This is a kid who was told 6 months ago, you're so underperforming that you might not go to school here any longer. And now he's feeling good about his science quizzes. This just kept on and kept on. Before we got to the end of the year, he was regularly scoring up in the 90 range, high 80, low 90 range on quizzes. And on his final exam, it was about a 90. What a magnificent thing for that young man, that he was able to end his science year with a B. He still had struggles in all his other classes. He was still on the bubble for not being able to go there any longer. But a class with the mastery model wasn't the issue for him. If I were teaching in a school described as challenged, urban students with 4-year reading level below grade level, That's what I would do. I would teach them all the way I taught Mark. And just watch what happens at the end of the year when they are not just scraping by, but for the first time in their life, probably, they're knocking it out of the park. Just watch what they do. I mean, it's life-changing when you feel like, I actually know this. I've learned stuff. I have this down. For the first time in my life, I feel the empowerment of someone figuring out how to teach in a way that I didn't just jump through hoops, but I learned. Folks, I've seen this happen so many times. I've talked to so many other teachers who've given me similar stories from when they started teaching using the same model. I'm a believer. And I believe it's so important because Jesus cares about the least of these just as much as he cares about the kids who are going to go to Rice University or Columbia. He cares about the least. And he says, when you've done it for the least of these, you've done it to me. Why haven't we been able to figure out a way to teach that would serve the least? Why is it that it's only the top that feel like they actually learned chemistry? I've seen it happen. The mastery model is the way to go. It's the way to go. Jeffrey.
All right. Well, I don't know how to follow up that. The remaining questions are much more pedestrian and more about, we could probably fit in a couple more. These you can probably answer fairly quickly, and they're more specific to the curriculum. So
fire away.
All right, can you talk a little bit about the difference between what the accelerated path, what they do at ASPC, accelerated physics and chemistry, versus the full courses in chemistry in the 10th grade and physics in the 12th grade?
And ASPC gets a toe into the water, into chemistry. So it covers the periodic table, bonding, ionic covalent metallic bonding, what an element is, different types of substances versus, solutions, mixtures. And it gets as far as balancing chemical equations and different types of reactions, double replacement, synthesis, decomposition. That's as far as it gets. It does not get into stoichiometry. It does not mention moles. It is not calculating molecular masses of compounds or anything like that. So you've basically got your whole chemistry class still to do. But the groundwork is laid so that the first 2 chapters of what's typically in a chemistry book are superfluous for those students. You can go straight into the quantum model of the atom, which is what the chemistry for accelerated students does. Chapter 1 is the quantum model. That is chapter 3 in the general chemistry book. It's the same chapter, but in general chemistry, it's chapter 3. And CAS, it's chapter 1. Now, there's something else that's important to say here, and that is this applies to both the intro physics books for 9th grade, Introductory Physics and ASPC. They are both very strong on repetitively drilling the students with all the basic math skills that we need to get down, and that students typically don't have down by then. So these include solving, isolating a variable in a linear equation, or even a nonlinear one, like density, mass over volume. Okay, solve for volume. All right. We need to stop making algebraic mistakes doing that. We need to get it down. Use of the metric system, using the metric prefixes, unit conversions, scientific notation. These are the basics. Plus one more, significant digits. I don't introduce the addition rule in that grade, but we do the multiplication rule and the other rules pertaining to the use of significant digits. And they start all this starts in chapter 2 in both books, and it goes all year. It's on every problem set, on every quiz and test. And a student one time who did not have me as a teacher, who had introductory physics, he said in one of the videos we made that by the end of the year, he was doing unit conversions in his sleep. They were just so easy, they were automatic. Now, chemistry teachers, how often have you been able to teach a chemistry class where everybody walking in the room was a complete master at unit conversions and the metric prefixes and the kilos and the micros and all of that, including significant digits, including isolating variables, including scientific notation and the correct key to use on the calculator for that? Right? Almost nobody who hasn't had people teaching using our mastery model in prior years. I remember my chemistry experience as a junior in high school. It was terrible. It was terrible. And you know what? I was in a new school. I had just moved. My family had just moved when I was a junior. So I felt socially isolated. I hated the school I was in. I acted out. I was ejected permanently from that class by the principal in about February. The teacher had had enough. I was replaced into a coach's class teaching easy chemistry so I could get an A by just showing up. It was bad. One of the things that made it bad was that I didn't know a unit conversion from the hole in the ground when I was a junior. And so when I started up, I had the same problem that almost everybody has. You're trying to make up for lost time on all these basic math skills that you've not mastered, because no one's ever seen to the fact that you were going to master them. They've let you just move on from year to year. And while you're doing that, you're trying to learn this very abstract science that's all about things that we can't see, atoms and compounds at the molecular level. So you're trying to learn all the math and the science at the same time. That's what makes chemistry so hard. If you remove the math by having people master that in the prior year or 2 years prior, if you're on the grade level track, it's a game changer. This is why physics first is so important, but its power is dependent on using the mastery model so that these math skills are mastered. And if they are, then when they come in your chemistry class, whoa, watch out. It's rocket time. So it is a game changer. So in the chemistry section in ASPC, I'm not trying to teach a whole chemistry class. We're really just kind of covering some of these basic things like I told you. Oh, another thing that occurs in that section is the history of the atomic model, going, from Democritus to Dalton to Rutherford to, Thomson, Rutherford, Bohr. So you get that history and you get different types of substances and those other basics like the bonding and so on. All right, so these are the subjects that are in the first 2 chapters of most chemistry books, and as well as my general one. So those are the ones you can skip. And that's why chemistry for accelerated students starts straight up with the atomic model, the quantum model of the atom. And by starting there, we have now time in that class to get to the more advanced topics that you would have in an AP class. Chemical equilibrium, thermochemistry, Gibbs free energy, those kind of things. Hess's law. These are thermochemistry topics that are not in general chemistry, but they're in the accelerated text. So, that text In fact, the ASPC and Chemistry for Accelerated Students together is 98% of a AP Chemistry curriculum. There's one or two little things I can think of that are on the AP test that are not in that book. Sigma and pi bonding models would be one of them, you know. But these little things that would be easy to add in if AP were one of your goals. Not that I'm saying it should be. There are other reasons why doing AP courses in classical schools is difficult. But just to show you the level of the chemistry. Anyway, I hope that was a helpful answer to the question. I see our time is over.
Yeah, unfortunately our time is up. First, thanks to John for your presentation and for giving more than just a presentation, but conveying some of your heart for the lives of students. That may have been the most valuable takeaway from this time. John, many people are expressing their gratitude. Please, you know, check the chat box. I hope you're seeing that, as I am.
Yes.
If your question didn't get answered and you want to follow up, I've put my one of my several email addresses in the chat box, and you can follow up with me, and I'll try to get an answer to your question. But we're gonna wrap up here. Thank you everybody for attending. There's going to be another session that I'm actually leading at 2 o'clock Eastern time.
2:30.
What's that?
2:30. Oh no, I'm sorry.
Is it?
My bad. I think it
no,
is.
I think it is. I think it's 2 o'clock Eastern on the topic of building a premier science program. So I hope some of y'all can join us for that. Anyway, we're done here, folks. Thank you for coming, and have a great afternoon.
God bless you. Thank you.